This is Play Ball by Jorge Posada with Robert Burley and illustrated by Raul Colon. This is a memoir by a famous baseball player, Jorge Posada. It's about how he learned to bat left-handed, and it was so hard he almost gave up. The book is Play Ball, and most of the story takes place in Puerto Rico, where Jorge grew up. Play Ball by Jorge Posada. I can't. Yes, you can. No, I can't. Yes. Get ready. Jorge crouched in the batter's box. Everything felt strange. He was batting left-handed for the first time. He squinted towards the pitcher's mound, where his father waited. His father lobbed the ball. Jorge lunged awkwardly and missed. Again. The ball bounced to the backstop and rolled alongside four other balls that Jorge had swung at and missed. This is impossible. I can't do it, Papa, the boy called. I can't. Yes, you can. His father trotted down from the mound to home plate. He stood behind Jorge and gently curled his arms around his son. Hold the bat this way, he said, moving Jorge's hand slightly, and bend your knees a bit more. Jorge's father stepped back. Jorge swung at the empty air. It feels weird, he complained. I'm good batting right-handed. Do I have to? Good isn't best, his father broke in, at the same time picking up the baseballs and heading back to the mound. It was early Saturday morning, and Jorge and his father were the only ones on the field. Jorge's father threw, and again Jorge swung and missed. On the next pitch, Jorge got a small piece of the ball. It flew upward, clanged against the crosswire top of the batting cage, and landed in the dust with a dull plop. See, his father called, you're getting the idea. It's not even in fair territory, Jorge grumbled. Then he leaned forward once more, tensed his body, and waited. Jorge thinks it's impossible for him to learn to bat left-handed. Why do you think he believes this? Splat. The hard rubber ball echoed across against the concrete wall. It was Wednesday. After the long bus ride home from school, Jorge wanted to do one thing: play baseball. Splat. Splat. When Jorge tossed the ball high off the wall, he drifted back and caught it on the fly. When he rifled it lower, he darted left or right to scoop up the resulting grounder. Jorge liked the pop sound when the ball went into the glove's wide, deep pocket. Hey, Jorge. Ernesto and Manuel walked into the vacant lot. The three friends were always together. Jorge's mother sometimes jokingly called them the Three Musketeers. Watch this. Jorge snared a ground ball and underhanded it to Ernesto, who spun and flipped it to Manuel. ¿Qué pasa? What's up? Jorge walked over to where his bat lay on the ground. Here's what's up, he said. Jorge put the bat on his left shoulder. My dad wants me to start batting left-handed and right, he said with a glum voice, to become a switch hitter. A switch hitter is someone who can bat right-handed and left-handed. Manuel gave Jorge a baffled look. That doesn't make sense. You're already a good hitter batting righty. Ernesto broke in. No, it does make sense. Batting left-handed makes it easier to hit a right-handed pitcher. I guess so, Manuel admitted. Remember that the big right-handed Roberto guy we played this last week in the park? When he pitched sidearm, I thought the ball was coming smack at my head. Whoa, scary. But I didn't strike out, Jorge spoke up. Next worst thing, Manuel teased, a couple of lame taps to the pitcher. The three boys were silent. Then Jorge grinned shyly and said, well, maybe I should practice a little left-handed. They played pepper. Ernesto and Manuel fielded. Jorge batted. His swing felt smoother. Sometimes he even made contact and sent a bouncing ball to one of his friends. Every chance he had, Jorge swung and swung. There were some dry bushes at the edge of the lawn in front of his house. Their tops came up to Jorge's waist. He crouched and swung again. He tried to just skim the tops of the bushes. He swung slowly and evenly. Then he stepped forward and swung with all his might. He felt his wrist snap around cleanly. He spun on his heels. It felt good. More follow-through, Jorge's father called out from the porch. where, unknown to Jorge, he had been watching. Jorge swung again. His father went on. "Let's go to the park, and I'll hit you some pop-ups." "Yes," Jorge shouted. He loved roaming the infield while his father lofted sky-high pop-ups that never seemed to want to come down. "Let's go right now, after I make 10 more cuts." His real name was Hector, but the team members called him El Flaco, the skinny one. The team was Jorge's team, Casa Cuba, and tall, thin Hector was the coach. Hector knew everything. He knew how a shortstop should charge a slow-rolling ground ball and fire it submarine style to first base. He knew how an outfielder had to aim his throws at the cutoff man. Hey, Hector could even throw a mean curveball. He knew something about Jorge, too. "You're good, little man," he liked to say, "and you can become very, very good if you want to." Jorge grinned. He sometimes felt as if Hector were a second father to him. Today's practice was over, but Hector was still on the mound, pitching to Jorge. If the pitcher was right-handed like Hector, a left-handed batter had a split second longer to gauge his swing. A curveball bent in toward him, too, not at his ribs, and then away. Jorge was beginning to understand what Hector meant when he said baseball is a game of inches. Hector threw again, a slow curve. Jorge timed his swing and drove a clean line drive into center field. "Batazo, you're doing it!" Hector called out happily, pounding his fist into his mitt. They walked together into the outfield and picked up the batted balls. Very soon, Casa Cuba would play its arch-rival, Club Capara, one of the top teams on the island, and Capara's coach was Jorge's dad. Hector looked down and smiled at Jorge. "You're ready for that, little man." Jorge swallowed hard. "Am I?" he wondered to himself. His coach, Hector, says baseball is a game of inches. What does he mean by that? A trip to New York City. It was big. It was bigger than big. It was grande. Jorge and his little sister Michelle had never seen so many people. "Hold my hand," their mother kept saying, and they did. Each person could get lost here, easily. They visited Chinatown. They went to the top of the Empire State Building. They strolled through Central Park. But the best was yet to come. On this day they took the subway. When they emerged from the underground, Jorge's father pointed. "Look, there it is." Jorge blinked in the afternoon sunlight. Up ahead on the high concrete wall, big letters blared the name, Yankee Stadium. Jorge caught his breath. Babe Ruth had played there, and Mickey Mantle, the greatest switch hitter in baseball history. So Jorge's family has traveled from Puerto Rico to New York now. They followed the crowd around a curved walkway that led inside and took an escalator to the upper deck. From his seat overlooking the right field foul line, Jorge looked down. His eyes traced a path from the smooth, dark infield to the ocean of green grass, to the hanging roof trim, and on up into the summer sky. There was a little flower garden behind a part of the outfield wall. His dad passed Jorge a pair of binoculars. Small monuments were in the garden. It was all so real and unreal at the same time. Jorge's father spoke softly. "Their names are all there. The Babe, Lou Gehrig, and others. Forever." Jorge gazed at the monuments. He put the binoculars down. He paused. "Someday, I'm going to play here," he announced excitingly. His mother and father smiled at each other. "He will. I know he will," Michelle blurted out. Just then, the Yankees broke from their dugout. Tall Dave Winfield jogged gracefully into right. Jorge raised the binoculars again and focused. He could even see clearly the number on the uniform of his favorite player. At last, the day of the big game had arrived. Play ball! It was Casa Cuba versus Casa Capara. Lots of people were watching, which made Jorge try harder and feel extra nervous, too. Things weren't going well either. Pitching for Capara was, yes, the same Roberto that Jorge had batted against in the park. Jorge batted right-handed then. Now it was left. But what did it matter? First inning, strikeout on 3 pitches. Third inning, a weak bouncer to first. Fifth inning, another strikeout. Eighth inning, and yet another. Jorge was replaying in his mind his woeful day at the plate when, in the top of the ninth, a simple ground ball went right through his legs. Zip! A base runner scored, and Capara went ahead. Jorge wished he could hide under a second base bag. He stood there all alone with the sun beating down until the half inning came. He trotted in and slumped onto his team's benches. The game was as good as over. How do you think Jorge's feeling right now? What do you think he will do when he goes to bat? But after two quick outs, Casacuba's luck changed slightly. First an error, then two bases on balls. Jorge picked up his bat and walked slowly toward the batter's box. He heard his teammates calling his name. He also heard the opposing catcher chattering at the pitcher. "Easy out, Roberto, easy." Jorge hesitated. He would bat right-handed this time. Enough of switch hitting. It wasn't his idea. This is impossible. Then he remembered. He walked to the left side. If it really was a game of inches, he would take his 1-inch advantage. He crouched as Roberto fired a sidearm rocket. Jorge saw the ball coming. He swung. It was only a foul tip, and yet it felt good. Yes, you can. Roberto delivered again, and Jorge swung. The bat whipped around in one complete arc as its fat part caught the ball perfectly. Jorge, already running, saw the ball zoom over the second baseman's head and higher still in the alley in right center. Go. He didn't need to slide into second base, but he did, for the sheer joy of it. He knew two runners had scored on his double. Casacuba had won. Batazo! Batazo! Jorge stood up and turned to see his teammates racing toward him. He looked for his father. His father wasn't running toward him, though. He was merely standing by the Capara bench with his arms crossed over his chest. Then Jorge was lost in a swarm of happy, leaping bodies. In the car, on the long ride home, Jorge's father was quiet. Jorge's mother asked questions about the game, and Jorge's sisters piped up, "He's the best. He's the best, isn't he, Papa?" Jorge's father broke into a smile. "Well," he said, reaching over and rubbing Jorge's head, "he's getting better and better." "Yes." Michelle went on, "Can we stop for a pizza? Can I choose the toppings, please?" Their father chuckled. "Pizza? Okay, but Jorge gets to choose. Tonight," he went on, "it's 2 toppings, one for the right side and one for the left." So what do you think that the author's message is for this book? And one last thing. Jorge Posada, this is a little blurb about Jorge Posada's life. Jorge Posada was born in Puerto Rico and always loved the game of baseball. Today, he is the starting catcher for the New York Yankees, a 4-time All-Star Game catcher and 4-time world champion. Jorge Posada is also a star off the field, where he started the Jorge Posada Foundation. He lives in New York with his wife Laura and their son Jorge Jr. and daughter Paulina. So what are you thinking about this? So this story is true, and he did actually get to go play in Yankee Stadium. I hope you enjoyed Play Ball by Jorge Posada.